Hello everyone, my name is Marcia, and this is Midwest Murders. The senseless murder of a young family in their rural Florida home left the small community of Osprey both stunned and terrified. With no known enemies, no apparent motive, and very few clues, the townsfolk wondered if the killer was one of their own. This is the story of Cliff, Christine, James, and Debbie Walker. Cliff Walker, age 26, was a ranch hand at the 100,000-acre Potter Palmer Estates cattle ranch. He lived with his wife, Evelyn Christine Walker, age 22, and his two children, 5-year-old James and 2-year-old Debbie, in a 5-room house on the edge of the ranch, about 2 miles east of Osprey, Florida. The home was at the end of the dirt road known then as Osprey Siding Road in sparsely populated Sarasota County. The couple, who had begun dating in high school, had married in 1955 and lived in the secluded ranch house for about 2.5 years. Late Saturday afternoon, December 19, 1959, Christine and the children met up with Cliff at the home of Don McLeod, another ranch hand who lived on a different part of the ranch. At approximately 3:45 p.m., Christine left the McLeod home in the family car for the short drive back to the Walker home. About 15 minutes later, after making arrangements with McLeod to go wild hog hunting the next morning, Cliff and the children headed for home in Cliff's work jeep. It would be the last time the family would be seen alive. At 5:45 a.m. the following day, Sunday, McLeod stopped by the house to pick up Cliff for the prearranged hunting trip. Finding the house eerily quiet and dark, he banged on both the front and back doors. Unable to rouse anyone, he forced entry by using a penknife to trip the lock on the back door. Spotting the bodies of Cliff, James, and Christine, he immediately left the home. Since his vehicle was towing a horse trailer, McLeod jumped into Cliff's Jeep and drove 2 miles to the nearest telephone to summon police. Police arrived to find a bloody and brutal crime scene. Sarasota County Sheriff Ross Boyer would take the lead. Christine was found badly beaten in the doorway between the living room and dining room. James and Cliff were laying in the living room just inside the front door. Christine and James had each been shot twice in the head with a .22 caliber rifle. Cliff had been shot once in the head. A search of the small home found little Debbie face down in the bathtub. Although there was no water in the tub when police arrived, her clothing was wet, and there was a blood-stained ring around the tub, indicating the child may have drowned. She was also shot in the head. County Medical Examiner Dr. Millard White would later rule Debbie was alive when she was placed in the tub, and drowning was the official cause of death. Police theorized Christine was ambushed when she arrived home from the ranch the previous day. While her clothing was in disarray, the medical examiner would later find she was not sexually assaulted. It appeared she had used her high-heel shoe as a weapon against her attacker. Bloodstains indicated she was shot in the living room and her body dragged to the doorway of the dining room. It also appeared that James and Cliff were shot as they came in the door, as they still had their hats and jackets on. 3 .22 caliber shell casings were recovered inside the house, and a blood-stained footprint made by a cowboy boot was found in James's bedroom. Finding several fingerprints on the walls and door casing, it was theorized that the killer waited behind the bedroom door until Cliff and James came in, and he shot them from there. Bloodstains were also found on the porch, indicating where the killer had apparently left the house. A search of the property turned up Cliff's .22 caliber rifle, which was stored in the barn and had not recently been fired. Due to the remote location of the Walker home, the nearest neighbor being a mile away, police were unable to find any witnesses who may have heard the shots. Over 100 neighbors, friends, and co-workers at the cattle ranch were all questioned. 23 were given lie detector tests. .22 caliber rifles owned by local residents were checked. Tracking dogs from Arcadia were brought in, but were unable to pick up a scent. The Palmer family, owner of the ranch, offered a $2,000 reward for information. The police could not establish a motive for the brutal slayings. Cliff and Christine had no known enemies, marital problems, or financial difficulties. The family lived modestly on Cliff's $55 a week salary, so robbery was ruled out. This led police to believe the best motive was it was an attack on Christine, and the killer was surprised by the arrival of Cliff and the children. Police have widely speculated that the killer was known to the family and killed to avoid identification. They believed he was an expert marksman, perhaps hunting or fishing in the area, and saw Christine return home, and it appeared to be a spur-of-the-moment crime. Other factors pointing to someone who knew the family was that the house was enclosed by two fences that you would have to come through in order to reach the house. The exterior fence contained two bulls. Anyone who lives on a farm knows that bulls can be very unpredictable and dangerous. While not impossible, it is unlikely a stranger would enter the enclosure if they were not familiar with the animals. The interior fence contained 3 hunting dogs who had access to the house. Again, while not impossible, it's unlikely a stranger would enter a fenced-in yard containing 3 dogs if they were not familiar with the animals. Hundreds of mourners attended the funeral for the family, which was held at the North Hillsboro Baptist Church, with the Reverends O.K. Collier and Sidney Albritton officiating. The family was laid to rest in the Oak Ridge Cemetery. Early on in the investigation, Perry Smith and Richard Hickok, the murderers of the Clutter family in Kansas some 5 months before the Walker murders, were investigated. The pair were seen in Osprey the day of the murders by 5 different people. While the duo admitted to being in Florida, they denied the killings. Also considered a suspect was a 65-year-old neighbor. While he has been identified in online news reports, I have chosen not to name him as he was never charged. He was in a neighboring town the afternoon of the killings and had no marks on him when photographed by police the day following the murders, making it unlikely he was the assailant. A cousin to Cliff was also investigated, but subsequently ruled out. Over the decades, several police agencies would either misplace or destroy evidence in this case, hampering more modern testing of the evidence. In 2007, Sarasota County Sheriff's Detective Kimberly McGrath reopened the case and worked for the next 5 years to connect the killings to Hickok and Smith. She believed she had evidence that Christine and Cliff were looking to trade in their 1952 Plymouth for a newer vehicle, specifically looking for a Bel Air, the same make and model Smith and Hickok were driving when they arrived in Florida. The working theory became that Smith and Hickok had arrived at the Walker home and Christine let them in, thinking they were selling the car. The bodies of Perry Smith and Richard Hickok were exhumed from the Mount Muncie Cemetery in Lansing, Kansas in 2012 to extract DNA for comparison to crime scene evidence. Neither was deemed a match, but only partial DNA could be retrieved. Their fingerprints also did not match those found at the crime scene. It was during this time that the DNA evidence collected from Christine's clothing, which was thought to be semen, was not semen at all. It was skin and blood cells from Christine herself. This was a crucial piece of evidence that had been used to compare against and rule out suspects for years. You may recall that I mentioned earlier that the original medical examiner stated that Christine was not sexually assaulted. At what point detectives thought they had found semen on her clothing is unclear. However, in 2019, her underwear was submitted to the lab for DNA testing. It produced 2 people's DNA, one female and another male, but the results were too mixed to identify anyone. Currently, Smith and Hickok are the leading suspects. I disagree with this. While the police may certainly have more information than I do, it doesn't make sense to me that the pair would target the Walker family. They had no criminal ties, were not known to have more than modest means. Further, with the bulls and the dogs so close to the house, it was not an easy target for robbery. I have also wondered if Don McLeod so easily opened the locked back door with a penknife, could the killer have also been aware of how easy it was to get in? McLeod himself was ruled out as a suspect early in the investigation, but what about other ranch hands or neighbors familiar with the house? The latest activity in the case occurred in July 2023, when the bodies of Cliff and Christine were exhumed in order to complete a DNA profile. The brutal murders of the Walker family continue to baffle investigators and haunt the town of Osprey. With no clear motive or culprit, this case serves as a stark reminder that some evils go unanswered. If you have any information, no matter how small, please reach out to the authorities. If you have thoughts, theories, or comments about the murders of the Walker family, please share them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and may the truth reveal itself in the shadows.